The world of Native Americans. Before skyscrapers and the busy cities we have today, the American landscape belonged to an array of tribes with their unique cultures. We're not talking about a footnote in history. Their narrative has existed for tens of thousands of years, littered with extraordinary facts, enormous struggles, and interminable fortitude. Take the journey with us to learn more about the incredible legacy of the North American First Peoples. Before we get into it, a quick note on terminology. By Indians in this video, we're not talking about people from India. We are talking about the Native Americans. It's a bit of a historical error. Christopher Columbus mistakenly thought he had landed in India when he came to the America. Hence the name given to the people he saw, Indians. While we recognize that not to be entirely true, the term stuck for many years. Most often we hear terms today such as Native Americans or the exact name of the tribe, such as Lakota or Comanche or Apache tribes. The story starts somewhere between 15,000 years ago and the end of the last ice age. Envision a gaggle of primitive men crossing over the Bering Land Bridge that actually joined Asia to North America on your behalf. They dispersed to every landmass on the continent over thousands of years, colonizing a remarkable variety of habitats, from frozen expanses of tundra to thick tropical forests. Clovis points, finely chipped stone tools that suggest the development of sophisticated hunting techniques are evidence of their ingenuity. But they were not only hunters. They established large mounds in urban city-states like Cahokia Glen Burnie, Illinois, as well as evidence of organized communities filled with taxation and trade. Between them, Native Americans established hundreds of distinct worlds, all profoundly transformed by their environments, long before Europeans came. Let's explore these regions. The Arctic gave rise to the Inuit and Aleut, a people that made their lives in frozen tundra where they excelled at fishing and hunting seals. In fact, they even created the kayak for faster traveling on water. For example, the Great Plains tribes such as the Lakota and Comanche tracked enormous herds of buffalo that were crucial to their way of life. The Hopi and ancestral Puebloans in the southwest made pueblos, plaster villages that complemented the desert style. The Pacific Northwest was a land of abundance. Natives such as the Tlingit and Haida made permanent villages and carved elaborate totem poles that told the history of their people. In California, there was an astonishingly rich linguistic mosaic with more than 200 languages in use. The Chumash and Miwok tribes lived as sophisticated hunter-gatherers bound by trade and amicable relationships. Then came the decisive moment, 1492. With the arrival of Europeans, history met with destiny. For someone like Columbus, there was a world to conquer, but for natives, it was an epic struggle. Communicable diseases like smallpox contributed to a genocidal loss of the tribes, taking as much as 90% of a typical community in a century. Spanish colonizers instituted the encomienda system, making chattel slaves of the indigenous for exploitation. Missions, as were brought to California, christened forced conversion, which came with the obliteration of the culture. The French and British also did their bit. French fur traders would ally with tribes like the Hurons, while British settlers would further encroach on Indian territories, resulting in bloody confrontations like King Philip's War. For Native Americans, the expansion of Europeans was the commencement of the end. A torrent of tribulations was just about to begin. Against all odds, Native American tribes fought against colonization. Their leaders emerged as symbols of defiance and hope. Tecumseh fought on behalf of the tribes in the Ohio Valley who came together to oppose encroachment. It was Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse who directed their people toward victory over General Custer at what came to be known as the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or Custer's Last Stand, as the American army's final attempt to conquer the Indians. It's Geronimo the Decay Apache who would stay a free man for years, always in the defense of his home. However, such persistence did not impede the federal policies which aimed to erase the Native American identity altogether. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 had crossed complete tribes and forced them to be moved to the west. The Cherokee, Choctaw, and many others suffered greatly on the terrible Trail of Tears. 2,000 perished from famine and illness. Later, to achieve their so-called civilization, Native children were placed in boarding schools and were prohibited to speak their languages or maintain their traditions. Think of a child removed from his family and his ethnicity drowned into the depths in a new world. And still, Native Americans have always resisted, not only with arms, but with reserves. The 1900s brought a resurgence of indigenous pride and activism. The American Indian Movement, AIM, of the 1960s and other groups called for justice, holistic sacred sites. The 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee by activists highlighted both breaches in treaty law and systematic injustice. Today, Native communities are reclaiming their heritage, from endangered languages to traditional ceremonies. From economic ventures such as tribal-run casinos to cultural contributions like the Navajo Code Talkers in World War II. We see how indigenous peoples are contributing and showing relevance throughout American history. But Native Americans have always resisted, not only violently, but also passively. Native Americans have survived and thrived, not just persevered. The lessons they have given us on community, taking responsibility for the earth, and hope should never be lost on us. Let us commemorate their contributions as we remember the journey they took, to be a part of the multicolored spectrum that is America's story.